Sup, you beautiful poetry lovers. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. We're here with another poetry review. We are taking a look at some poetry by Austin Sorrell today. Austin supports me on Patreon. Want to send a huge thanks to Austin for that. Thanks a bunch. We're going to take a look at these poems here. If you like what you see, you can find more of Austin on Instagram at Austin Sorrell. Sorry, Austin.Sorrell. I'll link that in the description. We do have some content warnings on these three poems that we're going to take a look at. Content warning for suicide, depression, death, and the poem titled Sfumado includes sexual longing, so be advised. Austin also left a note here. Austin said, "This is technically a quartet of poems, but I removed the fourth since it's the most finalized. If you can't get to the third, no worries. The first and second need the most work, in my opinion. The second one is also based off the Charles Francois Daubigny painting of the same name. I'm not familiar with that painter, I don't think. Maybe. We'll see. We call that an ekphrastic poem in poetry, a poem that's based off an image. So, coolio. Keep in mind, as always, I'm going to read this and then we'll jump right into the poetry. Keep in mind, I am not a professional reviewer. I'm just some guy on the internet who likes reading and writing. The opinions expressed in this video are only opinions. My interpretation of or reaction to the work will not be the same as everyone else's, for better or for worse. I will look for the good and the bad, but no matter what I say, don't be too hard on yourself, just keep writing. And for those in the comments, please be respectful. Also, I'm so sorry for any mistakes or mispronunciations of names or words. If I come across a word that I don't want to say for whatever reason, I will replace it with the word blank. All right. So let's get into our first poem here. As always, we'll do a preliminary reading of the poem, and then we'll just kind of take it line by line, piece by piece. So, Firebird. I am once more sleeping with the fan on. I'm taking longer walks and listening to more Stravinsky. All of my friends are convinced I am going to kill myself, and I don't blame them. Canary paint and pale gray living. Every time I reconsider my life, I fight to keep my mind ablaze. It terrifies me. So many small fires in crowds or trains. Sorry, lost my place there. So many small fires in crowds on trains. The line for coffee, the girl in the cafe making my tea, calling my name, but leaving before I walk over. I hate the white noise, quiet rustle of wind in leaves, smoke crackles, fire on everything, and Lauren says it's this way I walk through life without moving, or moving while always staying in the same place. Come blistering June, on some hike in western Colorado, I dreamt I was reborn as an aspen, alone. No roots, no line for flame. I'm not even a religious person, but for a brief moment I was almost perceiving it. Life, perverted, self-indulgent life, everywhere around me. A grove not 10 feet away, yet not a soul willing to touch me. Nature everywhere, connected in its swallowing, underneath, into, capable of heat and fire, absorbing the expansive stomach among and near, but never me. A world joined in the noise of movement, disgustingly flammable. One day, I'll let you go. Okay. So I've got some thoughts, but I think I will save them as we just go through here. So, Firebird. One thing to note about the title, kind of interesting that there's a period at the end of it. You don't really see that often with poetry titles. So that's interesting to note. Also, Firebird. Let me look that up real quick, because like my thinking is, maybe we're talking about a phoenix, but I'm wondering, is there an actual bird called the Firebird? Oh, there's a car, the Pontiac Firebird. I wonder if that's what it's referencing. Maybe. I kind of doubt it, but it could be. We'll see. Anyway, so let's take it piece by piece. I am, once more, sleeping with the fan on. So that's kind of neat as an opener. Yeah. It raises some questions for me, like good questions, positive questions, not like questions of misunderstanding, but like, what does it mean for this speaker to sleep with the fan on, right? Because it's important enough that they make it a declarative, so I don't think it's just a matter of, hey, it's hot outside again, or, maybe that's part of it, but maybe there's more to it, right? So, yeah, interesting. I'm taking longer walks and listening to more Stravinsky. All of my friends are convinced I'm going to kill myself, and I don't blame them. So, that's pretty interesting to me because I'm taking longer walks and listening to more Stravinsky. I don't know, that almost sounds like positive, right? At least in my mind. Like taking a long walk, that sounds really nice, but I guess I can see it the other way around too, where it's like you're walking more slowly because you're depressed, right? So, yeah, I can see it both ways now that I think about it. Canary paint, I wasn't really sure what that referred to, so that's another thing I'm gonna look up real quick just in case. Do they mean it? Maybe the author means like canary yellow, like colored paint. That's kind of all I can glean. Um, and I suppose if that's the case, it's supposed to be like a juxtaposition against pale gray living, which kind of interesting, but also like a little abstract, like because I don't really know what canary paint is referring to. I assume it's like the just the speaker's surroundings, right? Like they live where the walls are yellow, and yet they live a pale gray life, right? That's that's what I gather. Every time I reconsider life, I fight to keep my mind ablaze. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about that. It makes sense, right? It terrifies me. So many small fires in crowds, on trains, the line for coffee, the girl in the cafe making my tea, calling my name, but leaving before I walk over. That was probably the part of the poem that stuck out the most to me. I don't know, and yeah, call this personal preference for sure, but, like, I just like when poems do details like that, like, that's really what makes a poem unique, I think, are these flashes that we don't get in other poems, right? This is where the speaker is kind of giving us a piece of themselves that no other poet can, right? At least that's my way of thinking. Yeah, the girl in the cafe making my tea, calling my name, but leaving before I walk over. There's something about that that's interesting. Um, like you pay for the tea and then you leave as it once it's ready. Like you don't presumably you don't even take the tea, right? I don't know. It's just curious, right? I hate the white noise, quiet rustle of wind in leaves, smoke crackles, fire on everything. So I guess one thing I sort of failed to point out was how the fire motif is sort of building itself. I fight to keep my mind ablaze. It terrifies me, so many small fires in crowds on trains, fire on everything. I'm guessing fire is sort of analogous to life here, right? Like the idea that a living person is a burning flame, right? And hence I fight to keep my mind ablaze, like the speaker is fighting suicidal ideation, right? That's my reading thus far, anyway. I also find it funny that they say, I hate the white noise, but they go to sleep with the fan on. And so it's like, are they doing that as an act of like self destruction, self punishment, self loathing, right? Because fans, I think, provide really nice white noise, but if the speaker hates white noise, I don't know. What do I make of that, right? Anyhow. And Lawrence says it's this way I walk through life without moving, or moving while always staying in the same place. That phrase was hard for me to follow on the initial reading. It's a long phrase, and in fact, it's part of the previous sentence. It's separated by this ampersand, but even so, even just this half of the sentence, it's long and it's got quite a few moving pieces. Lawrence says it's this way. Yeah, and this is sort of like vague, right? Like I remember one of my professors in undergrad when I turned in essays, he was very adamant that you never use the word this because it's too vague, right? Like the reader doesn't really know for sure what you're referring to when you say this, right? And I assume this is referring to like the self description up here that the speaker gave us. but even so, it feels too nondescript, right? So I think there could be a more evocative way, or even add a word after this, right? Like Lauren says, it's this pessimistic way I walk through life, but I wouldn't actually use the word pessimistic because I think you could think of something more creative, right? Obviously, I can't, not off the top of my head, but I think you get the idea, right? Lauren says it's this way I walk through life without moving, or moving while always staying in the same place. Or, you could just put a comma after the word life, and then this way would refer to without moving, right? Lauren says it's this way I walk through life, comma, without moving, or moving while always staying in the same place. Yeah. Come blistering June. Blistering's a good word. It still ties into our fire motif, which is neat. Come blistering June, on some hike in western Colorado, I dreamt I was reborn as an aspen, alone. So that idea of rebirth kind of ties to the phoenix thing that I was talking about, but it's being reborn as a tree, which is interesting. Um, no roots, no line for flame. I'm not even a religious person, but for a brief moment, I was almost perceiving it. Um, so I will say this could just be, my lack of understanding in general, but when the speaker says no roots, no line for flame, I thought they were carrying from the previous sentence where they say, I dreamt I was reborn as an aspen alone, no roots, no line for flame. I was thinking like, okay, so they want to be an aspen tree, but an aspen tree that doesn't have roots. But I think what they're actually saying is, I want to be an aspen tree. Separately, as I am now, I have no roots and no line for flame, right? So that threw me a little bit on the first reading, but I think I'm getting it now. No roots, no line for flame. I'm not even a religious person, but for a brief moment, I was almost perceiving it. It kind of has the same problem as this, where it's, again, like unspecific, but I assume we're talking about this, the phrase that comes next, right? Um, I'm not even a religious person, but for a brief moment, I was almost perceiving it. Life, perverted, self-indulgent life everywhere around me. Um, I guess I kind of have a problem with that phrase because it's like a non-religious person, of course, can still see life, right? Um, and I know that, the speaker is talking about like life on a more spiritual, transcendental kind of scale, I guess. Um, I don't even know if transcendental is the right word there, to be honest, but I think you get what I'm saying, right? They're talking about something more than the temporal and more than the physical, right? But I don't know. I just don't entirely get that sense from the word choice here. So I don't know. When somebody starts a phrase with like, I'm not a religious person, but I expect them to then say something to the effect of like, I believe in spirits, or I think there is a higher power, or something like that, right? The phrase that follows here, I'm not even a religious person, but it doesn't actually seem like super contradictory to religion, right? I hope that makes sense. Uh, there are ways that you could go. There are ways that you could go about that, right? You could change how this sentence starts. Like, I'm not a sentimental person. Maybe that's not quite the right word either. Or you could change the follow up to be more overtly religious, right? So you've got options, and keep in mind all personal preference, right? And so for some people, that phrase may work. Moving on. Life, perverted, self-indulgent life, everywhere around me, a grove not 10 feet away, yet not a soul willing to touch me. I don't really know what to make of that, if I'm being honest. Um, it feels kinda like a diversion, and maybe this is another issue where it's like, this is a really long sentence, right? And in poetry, I think you can get away with longer sentences easier than you can with prose, because you have the line breaks, and the line breaks kind of encourage us to pause, even without punctuation, right? Even so, this is a long sentence, and I feel like it kind of lost itself a little bit, if I'm being honest. Like, we were talking about, I'm not oh, sorry, I started the sentence too early. But anyway, it starts, "I'm not a religious person, but I was almost perceiving it, life, perverted, self-indulgent life." Everywhere around me, a grove not 10 feet away, yet not a soul willing to touch me. Okay, I think now I see where it's coming from, where the grove is a metaphor for all of the life around the speaker, yet not a soul I guess yeah, it's just that last portion, "Yet not a soul willing to touch me," that kinda throws me for a loop. Maybe that should be its own sentence, period, "Yet not a soul willing to touch me." I don't know. You can call that nitpicking, but yeah, it just threw me, that's all. Nature everywhere, connected in its swallowing. I like that, good word. Underneath, into, capable of heat and fire, absorbing the expansive stomach among and near, but never me. So the use of prepositions is pretty interesting. Underneath, into, among, near. Um, and this kind of not just in this instance, but like throughout the poem, reminds me in a lot of ways of the Romantic poets, where there is this immense longing to be in nature, and by being in nature, kind of, you know, find a higher meaning, a higher purpose, right? Yeah, I get that sense a lot. Um, yeah, just an observation, I guess. Um, yeah, I have another thought, but I'm gonna save it as we come to the end here. A world joined in the noise of movement, disgustingly flammable. One day I'll let you go. So I was a little confused as to who the you was when I first read it. Now I'm kind of thinking it's the world, right? And so one day I'll let the world go. Um, I don't know about the word disgustingly there. I get the sense for the speaker's depression, but I don't know. I didn't get the sense that like they hated everybody else, right? And that's kind of what the word disgustingly evokes for me. So I don't know. It just didn't quite feel like the right word choice. But anyhow, the final thought I had that I saved before this last bit. There's a lot going on in this poem, and I wonder if, in fact, it should actually be two different poems, because we've got the whole fire motif, but then we've also got the desire to be an aspen tree, and then some of these more natural references, right? And obviously, a poem can be about more than one thing, for sure, Dadoy. But I don't know. There's a lot going on here, and it feels really complex. And I wonder maybe if there are actually two poems here that are stitched together, and you, the author, need to undo that stitching and give each poem the voice and the attention that it deserves. Yeah, that's just kind of the vibe I'm getting here. It doesn't have to be that way. Like I said, poems can obviously be about more than one thing, but maybe give it a try just as an exercise, right? And maybe it's not even what I'm talking about, right? Maybe the tree stuff, the nature stuff, and the fire stuff, maybe those do belong in the same poem, but then maybe there are other details that belong in a separate poem, right? So just give it a try as an exercise. I certainly don't know everything, not even close. Um, but I know that there's something here for certain, absolutely. So keep going with this. Let's move on to our next one, Landscape Along a Country Road. I'm going to look up that painting real quick. You can do the same, dear viewer, if you want. Charles Francois D'Aubigny. Okay, that actually looks familiar. Cool. Anyway, let's read through it once, and then we'll go line by line. So, landscape along a country road. I'm bad at judging the distance between things, the trees to the grass, the sky, the grass to the sky, the fence to the rung, and the space beyond it, faded into marigold ochre. I'm always stuck saying the same phrases. I'm laughing at the trees, with the trees, around the trees, reminded of something, and it's the same, always stagnant. I see amber, I see something akin to sunlight. The distances from the barn go out in all directions, onto whatever things they can reflect off of. I thought I saw you in the field. I figured that it must be buried in the dirt with your spine, just wrong enough to understand it was a trick of the sunlight. Out in the tall grass, out with the church house, and I craved the bucolic and the pastoral. I wanted to see the insignificance of everything, and how we weighed with that. But the clouds were painting the landscape blue. You know the story. The dirt road, the distances, the cattle, how it seems, how far we can push things apart, how far it takes before the barn becomes the church, before the fence becomes the gate, before I can say the dirt is the linens and the space enough for me to sit down and see clearly. It's circling. The tree looks the same from all sides. If I walk with enough care, I will never get farther. If I never look away, it will always. Interesting. Okay, so let's take it piece by piece. I'm bad at judging the distance between things. The trees to the grass to the sky, the fence to the rung, and the space beyond it faded into marigold ochre. The slash there is interesting, and we get another one down here. Um, First of all, let me say relatable sentiment. I am also bad at judging the distance between things. Also, like judging height of things. I'm so bad at that. Anyhow, sorry, I'm just looking at the painting here. I guess I didn't realize that that structure there is. Oh yeah, it does kind of look like a church. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Anyway, sorry, that's besides the point. Let's talk about the language. Um, I'm not actually sure that this is the best place to start the poem, personally. Um, but we can talk more about that when I do think we get to the place where the poem should start. That being said, like I said, it's a relatable sentiment. I'm sure I'm not the only one who relates to it. So, I'm not saying it needs to be removed. I'm just saying I'm not sure that this is where the poem should start, but let's keep going. I'm always stuck saying the same phrases. I'm laughing at the trees, with the trees, around the trees, reminded of something. I kind of like laughing with the trees best, and frankly, I'm not sure you need at the trees or around the trees, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, I think I'm always stuck saying the same phrases. I'm laughing with the trees. Yeah, I think there's some power in the poignancy of that. There's interest in that, right? Laughing at the trees and around the trees, I don't think that holds the same interest, personally. Also reminded of something. Again, a little vague. I don't often love the word something in poems. Um, yeah, yeah, just a personal note, I guess. And it's the same, always stagnant. I see amber, I see something akin to sunlight, the distances from the barn to go out in all directions, onto whatever things they can reflect off of. I thought I saw you in the field. I figured that it must be buried in the dirt with your spine just strong enough to understand it was a trick of the sunlight. I think maybe that's where you want to start the poem. I thought I saw you in the field. I figured that it must be buried in the dirt with your spine just strong enough to understand it was a trick of the sunlight. That is very peculiar. That's a very peculiar line, and I mean that in a good way. Buried in the dirt with your spine just wrong enough to understand it was a trick of the sunlight. Also, I think that I think if this were the opening, it would provoke a lot more questions and interest than the current opening, right? I thought I saw you in the field. The immediate question is, oh, who is the you that the speaker is talking about, right? I I'm interested to keep reading so I can know. Anyhow, hope that makes sense. Out in the tall grass, out with the church house. There's our other slash, which is interesting. It's kind of used in a different way from the last one, which again, I find peculiar. Out in the tall grass, out with the church house, and I craved the bucolic and the pastoral. I wanted to see the insignificance of everything and how we weighed with that. Again, that feels like very romantic era poetry. um, I like those lines, I think. I like the word bucolic and pastoral a lot. Um, and the sentiment is pretty interesting, I think. Yeah. but the clouds were painting the landscape blue. You know the story. The dirt road, the distances, the cattle, how it seems, how far we can push things apart, how far it takes before the barn becomes the church, before the fence becomes the gate, before I can say the dirt is the linens and the space is enough for me to sit down and see clearly. I rather liked that part of the poem as well. This idea of like, I don't know, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but the way I thought of it was like all of these things are kind of being pushed together, you know? And really like how different are all these things from each other, like when you really get down to it, right? And by extension, how different are we from the earth beneath us, right? Is there that much that like divides us from this planet? Yeah. And I think that's neat. Like I said, I could be misinterpreting, but I don't know. I like the interpretation I came up with. It's circling. Okay, once again, we have a use of the word it that feels really vague. The tree looks the same from all sides. If I walk with enough care, I will never get farther. If I never look away, it will always. Again, the use of the word it there is too vague for me. Like if I walk with enough care, I will never get farther. If I never look away, it will always. Right? Is the speaker trying to say like if I never look away, it will always get farther away? If that's the case, the sentiment there just confuses me. Yeah, I'm sorry, this ending is confusing to me, and I don't know, that's happened a few times throughout both of these poems where it kind of feels like the speaker of the poem is making reference to something, and I'm supposed to know what they're talking about, but I don't. I don't have the what's the word I'm looking for? The context to understand what is being talked about. And that's frustrating as a reader because, like, there are very natural questions that are going to emerge when reading poems like these. And being left without any answer, like I said, a little bit frustrating, right? So, for example, I thought I saw you in the field. Who is you? I just don't know that I get a clear answer on that, unfortunately, and we get you know the story, and so it's like, yeah, there must be a personal history, a personal relationship between the you and the I in this poem, but I don't get a sense for that, and I want that sense. Um, and then there was another example. Oh yeah, reminded of something, like reminded of what? Like, that's the immediate question that any reader is going to ask, right? Reminded of what? And I don't know that I get the answer in the poem, and maybe the answers are here and I'm just not seeing them, in which case, sorry, author. Um, but yeah, I don't know. There's like I said, it's like it feels like I'm supposed to have the context and yet I don't. Yeah. That said, there are really good things in both of these poems, and I think I highlighted the parts that I liked, and I hope that you build on those. And yeah, for this poem especially, try giving us those answers, right? Try breaking away from the mystery. Um, another one of my undergrad professors used to say that good authors don't withhold, and I think that's true because readers come to a piece of literature to know the story or to know the feeling, right? Um, and so if the author is withholding that, it's like, what are we doing here, right? I think I've talked about this in one of the main channel videos, but there's a contract between the reader and the author, and like the reader can back out at any time, and so it's the author's job to make sure that the reader keeps reading, right? One of the MFA professors, what is it that they say? It's something along the lines of the reader is not obligated to read your book. You're trying to convince the reader to read your book. And the same is true for poetry, right? So, yeah, anyway, hope these thoughts are making sense. Let's go ahead and take a look at our third poem here. Sfumado. I give points for a creative title, and it's got a period at the end of it again. Interesting. All right, we've got a poem in 3 parts here, which let's take a look. Sfumato. 1. When the universe burst into being, it was the glory of midsummer, and clouds, all billowing sails and paint strokes, had yet to blossom. This is the place I made. It slipped through the turpentine, but this is the place I made. It kept on slipping into sight. 2. A body is made into yours, as though roots leaking inwards. The boy I loved tells me. Supposedly, he is sculpted from clay. His face distorts at the slightest shift of sunlight, the curves of his chest, his jaw, the transparency of his arms and legs, and the light, pale streaks of dirt, from the center of his eyes to his shoulders. All this, a blanket uncovering something formed quickly, smudged till eyes can comprehend it. 3. I wanted to sleep with him. I wanted to paint him beneath the scumble, a certain darkness, as though he had been completely swallowed up. Then you should, he said. It came out wrong. I saw the shape of his hands, the expanse whitening around him. I kept trying to say his name, but my hand was blurring it. That is the victory. I couldn't remember anything at all. A body takes root in order to decompose. Something must be broken down for this to happen. Okay. Once again, intriguing. Let's take a look. Sfumato. 1. When the universe burst into being, it was the glory of midsummer, and clouds, all billowing sails and paint strokes, had yet to blossom. So I like the repeated use of the B sound in our first sentence here, these first 4 lines. Burst into being, all billowing, had yet to blossom. I like it. It's got a good sound to it. And as far as opening lines go, I like that a lot, when the universe burst into being. Like I said, it's got a nice sound to it. Now, personally, I would move this up closer to the top. This is the place I made. I don't know if there's a really easy way to do that, but I don't know. It's just my thinking. Um, because that's really intriguing. It sounds like at first we're talking about, the Big Bang, but then the speaker says, "This is the place I made." And so it's like, oh, is the speaker like a god? Are they the Christian God? Or is this world something else, right? Not the world as we know it. Could be a painting, right? It literally does say paint strokes, which sounds just like, fanciful figurative language, but it could be literal too. Um, this is the place I made. It slipped through the turpentine, but this is the place I made. It kept on slipping into sight. I don't know how I feel about the repetition of "this is the place I made." Maybe you could find a way to rephrase it on the second go around, but again, just one man's opinion. And the final line of the stanza there, "it kept on slipping into sight." Kind of kind of interesting. And again, I like the alliteration there, slipping into sight. Here the "it" feels clearer than other times. It sounds like the "it" is referring to the universe, right? Uh, Forgive me if I'm wrong. If I am wrong, might need to clear that up. Speaking of clearing things up, it's hard to know where this is gonna go, right? And again, I think back to what Clinton McCown said, where you're trying to convince the reader to read, right? And so, I don't know, maybe there should be some more clear direction here, potentially. I don't know. 2. A body is made into yours, as though roots leaking inwards. The boy I loved tells me. The boy I loved tells me. I guess, again, it's just the situation where I ask, the boy tells what? What did they tell you? Um, did they tell you this? That a body is made into yours as though roots leaking inwards? And who is the you? Is it the boy? Why are they referred to as you and then the boy, right? So yeah, I'm confused. And I hope you can see the confusion there. I hope that's not me being obtuse, right? I really hope that's not the case. Supposedly, he is sculpted from clay. His face distorts at the slightest shift of sunlight. That's neat. kind of a reference to Pygmalion, right? Maybe not. I don't know. It sounds very Greek, very Roman, which is neat. And I don't know, maybe that's something you can build on, right? This idea that because the boy is made from clay, what's that like? What's life like for him? If harsh sunlight is, detrimental to his shape. Yeah. Yeah, could be something to build on. The curves of his chest, his jaw, the transparency of his arms and legs, and the light, pale streaks of dirt from the center of his eyes to his shoulders. The transparency of his arms and legs is probably what interests me most there in that sentence. Yeah, because it gets me wondering, like, why are they transparent? And that's not one of those questions that, like, necessarily needs an answer, right? There are certain questions where if we don't get an answer, it's frustrating, right? But this just feels like poetic license, right? Because for all we know, that might not even be literal, right? It might be a figurative transparency. So yeah. Um, the other details are also, I would say, of interest, particularly pale streaks of dirt from the center of his eyes to his shoulders. That's peculiar, to say the least. All this a blanket, uncovering something formed quickly, smudged till eyes can comprehend it. Hmm. Yeah, I hate to sound like a broken record, but again, I just don't know that I'm getting it. I'm sorry. I I feel like I have so little to offer because I'm just not quite understanding everything that's actually happening on the surface level here, right? Um, maybe you need someone smarter than me to look at these, or I don't know, commenters, let me know. Are you understanding this, right? All this a blanket uncovering something formed quickly, smudged till eyes can comprehend it. Yeah. I I don't get it. Like I guess I assume the blanket is metaphorical, right? But maybe it's again the use of the word something, right? It's too vague. I don't know. Yeah. I don't follow. I'm sorry. But on to stanza 3. I wanted to sleep with him. That's about as clear as it can get. So I applaud that. Um the slashes are still interesting to me. There was wait. Okay, yeah, there are two in this poem. They're both here in the third stanza. Um, I don't know. Are they necessary? Like, are they doing? Is this one in particular doing anything that a period couldn't do? Is it maybe even more of a distraction than anything else? I don't know. I wanted to sleep with him. I wanted to paint him beneath the scumble. Good word. A certain darkness, as though he had been completely swallowed up. Um, So the desire to paint kind of suggests that this was a literal painting in the first stanza, but also kind of something more than that, right? Where the painting essentially came to life, right? It became something much more than just a painting, right? Um, I wanted to paint him beneath the scumble, a certain darkness, as though he had been completely swallowed up. Again, I'm just not entirely sure I follow. I guess we're just describing the boy as like maybe a little dark, bit of a dark past, right? Then you should, he said. It came out wrong. I saw the shape of his hands, the expanse whitening around him. Again, the slash here, like a comma could do that job just as well, right? And even with less of a distraction. Again, one man's opinion. The expanse whitening around him. I kept trying to say his name, but my hand was blurring it. That's kind of neat as a sentence. That is the victory. I couldn't remember anything at all. A body takes root in order to decompose. Something must be broken down for this to happen. I don't quite understand how we got here, right? Like, what was so wrong about what the boy said? And like, why did that create such a devastating result? I'm just not following the train here, I'm afraid. Um, yeah, I feel like I need more context. Sorry. Um, like the speaker says, that is the victory, and I'm just a little bit lost. Like, what do they mean by that? Um, and again, maybe it's the use of the word that, kind of vague, right? That is the victory. I couldn't remember anything at all. It's like, yeah, again, I feel like I just need more context. I'm sorry, man. Um, that being said, there's a lot of good stuff here. I really like the unique use of language, absolutely. And ultimately, for me, that's what poetry is all about, right? Saying things in unique ways. Of course, the burden of cohesiveness and comparability? No. Uh, comprehensibility, sorry. The burden of comprehensibility is still there, right? It's a fine line to walk, and it's a hard line to walk where you want your poem to say something new and unique and original. You don't want it to sound trite, right? That would be terrible. I think no poet wants their poems to sound like some other poet's poems. But at the same time, you do still have to make them accessible, right? And like I said, it's a hard line to walk. And accessible, of course, like has a variance in relativity, I guess, where what's comprehensible to one person might not be for another, right? And again, I kind of acknowledged that as we went through this, maybe I'm not the target audience for these poems, and maybe there are people out there who will understand them, even though I can't, right? But yeah, I'd be curious to hear what other folks think. And Austin, I'd be curious to hear what you think too. I hope this was helpful for you, even, despite my lack of understanding. Or, maybe it is the lack of understanding that will help you out here in the end. We'll see. We'll see. But Austin, thank you for submitting these. It really was enjoyable to read them. Like, I mean that so sincerely, even though, I didn't quite get everything here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Seriously. Again, you can find more of Austin on Instagram, and that'll be linked in the description, austin.sorrell on Instagram. And I think we'll just leave it there. Thanks again, Austin, and thanks to all of you for watching. And keep in mind, this is a rough draft.